pieces here and then, but because it went to the ocean and not in exactly the spot that they were trying to make it land or crash land, the spaceship kind of with the atmosphere, it kind of spread in pieces, and then it fell in a very large area in the ocean, and some of the parts, or most of it, went to very deep ocean into very deep ocean areas. So they end up only with what they brought on the capsules with them. They found on this new planet life. So that was what they were expecting, and they had this theory of parallel evolution. So far what they have thought is that evolution goes always the same way. And as an example, if you have one evolution area planet in one place and you have another in another place, the first thing that's going to happen is both are going to have animals living on the sea. Then you will have animals or plants living on the ground. Then you will have insects going to the ground. Then you will have etc., etc., etc. So evolution will be the same way. So both places will end up with animals eating plants. You will have also animals eating plants. They will have an animal that will hunt these plant eaters to eat. They will have the same animals that plant eaters to eat, or animals that live on trees, animals that dig holes, insects, etc. Animals that fly, animals that move on the ground, snakes, stuff. So everything will be pretty much the same, not exactly the same, because sometimes they realize evolution kind of, because the planets are not exactly the same. So there's like this thing is an obstacle. Evolution will go in another direction and then it will go back. So you will have some animals that are maybe a little different from one place to the other. But at the end you will have plant eaters, hunters, climbing animals, flying animals, etc. And they were expecting to find something similar to their evolution in here, but their surprise was when they found humans and they realized they were pretty much like them. Humans at this age were gathering hunters. They already have fire, stone weapons and stuff, but the lizard realized that they were pretty much like them, and they didn't want to disrupt their evolution, so they tried to stay away as much as they could of them. But at the end, they end up living together because the lizards wanted to take, let's say, advantage of this situation, of every situation they could find in order to survive and have a better life on this new planet. Because life was tough here. It was not like it was before in their planet with all the technology and all the things that were available there. So they were trying to put that, bring that back to them into the new planet. They lost their ship, so it was going to be more complicated than what they expected. So they took advantage of the humanity on this planet. Now, that is what the history of the book said. And there were other myths, more specific situations of the interaction about, like how they told the humans how to ride, how they told the humans how to create the to touch them. They told them agriculture, writing, the languages, etc. At this time they were kind of enclosed in a very specific area. They didn't have any transport, so even if they were like affecting humanity, There were other places where they didn't have any influence. Remember, this was a very small group of. They have probably at this time less than 1,000 eggs, and a group of like 20 living lizards. So we're talking about less than 1,000 individuals at the end when the eggs hatch. So at the end, John read this book, and he kind of understood what was the situation. And he talked a little bit about this with his friend Josh, and about all the conspiracies, about how lizards control the economy, how lizards control all the resources on the planet, and how they control humanity to make it more productive. So in these groups, there was not only one group. His father belonged to one of these groups. There were other groups, and they decided one day. Some of the groups, not all, everybody disagreed on what to do, how to face the situation, and how to make the change to take back control of the resources on the planet. But in one of the groups, there were these two girls, Axie, Lisa, and a person called Mr. Rogers, and another one called Robert. So this other group was pretty much controlled by Mr. Rogers and Robert, and they decided to make this awareness of humanity, and taking in their side all the current electronic communication systems, and publish these theories and these ideas, and how we can do to defeat these lizards, etc., etc. So Lisa and Axie were part of this group, and were kind of friends of John and Josh. So they go along together. They were already like 16, 15, so they were kind of dating. They met these girls in this group. Their father knew this other group, so they got involved in this situation that was in charge of spreading the information to the people. After a while, doing this, well, a lot of things happened in this season. They got mainstream exposure. They were able to expose this on TV with the ridicule of the public, of course. So there was like a mindset of resisting this reality, which sounds so incredible and so evil that people say this cannot be true, even if they try to prove the existence. But at this time, we are talking about maybe 2,000 years after the arrival of the lizards to the planet. So at this time, nobody knew exactly where these 20 landing ships were, who had them, or anything. So this was a complete myth, history, something that may come from fantasy. And so even John was unable to be completely sure if this was true or not. The only thing that he was sure is that he could see the difference between humans and the lizard people. For him was pretty obvious. For humans, it was not. Humans cannot see why these other people was able to control the planet. They knew something was wrong, something was off, and so some of the literature was kind of leaked out of the lizard group through dissidents like John's father, and so this doesn't happen really often, but was often enough to create like an awareness of this situation. And the information was pretty little. And John's father was a dissident, so he was not liked. Well, his people didn't like him, and he was pushed away to make his own life with humans. So at the end, these groups were grow, and some became getting international appeal, and other groups born in other countries, until they decided that, you know what, we are not able to convince humanity that these lizard people exist, and this is the people that it's controlling. So let's change the rhetoric. Let's create a political movement and fight this in as a social and political situation, which it was. People is getting poorer and poorer, and the lizards were getting richer and richer, and there was no way to stop it. So they decided to take away this lizard thing, and just tell the people, you know, this rich people is abusing you, without mentioning that they were lizards or anything. This rich people is abusing you. You need to do something about it. We need to take arms, and we need to attack them and take the control out of them. So now they became a threat to the government and economy. So these dissident groups were growing in countries, especially in countries that had police states, or that the people was more oppressed. Because there people were like, we didn't like the situation that we have here, and it's very easy to create a dissident group in that type of places. So these groups were growing all over the planet, in Latin America, and Arab Peninsula, and Europe, and they were getting together. They were getting weapons, and so an imminent war or a revolution was pretty much ahead. So the lizard governments realized that this was happening, and that now it became a real threat. In the past, they used this dissuasive thing with the media and everything, just convincing the people that all this was a joke or a fantasy or not real. But now that this had become a political and situation, and people was getting real on it with weapons, they decided to take action and attack these groups. So everything began like a small rebel groups all around the world, attacking places, pretty much like a terrorism groups. So the government put the label of terrorists on these people. You know what? These are terrorists. You should not get involved with them. They're just trying to create problems. They have a political agenda that's unreal. There's not a thing like oppression. You are fine, stuff like that. But what these guys were saying, you know what? No, you're oppressing me. You're taking all the goods and the wealth of the planet for yourself, and you're just giving me a little stuff to keep me quiet. So this is how the war started. Eventually, and this is something, and how lizards were able to control people. Anyway, how would they do it? Well, they were very smart, and they were capable of reading people movements, and reading behind the words. They were also using very sophisticated technology to monitor all the networks and everything that was going on, so they can go and publish or try to distract, uh, distract, deny, or attack these groups. So attacking mean a lot of things. One was just make them ridicule, or other was flagging them as undesirable people from society, taking away their jobs, or the way of sustaining themselves, making their lives very complicated and miserable, so they focus more in surviving than in these political agendas. And they also put people in jail for other charges. And of course, when the armed movement started, they were putting people in jail because of terrorism. So they have a lot of tools to be able to manipulate humanity into doing what they wanted to do. So at the end, John, Josh, Axie, and Lisa ended up enrolling in this rebel terrorist group. On charge was Commander Lewis. So Commander Lewis, Lisa, Axie, John, and Josh were a small group. Well, their tasks were basically just spreading propaganda, creating problems for the lizards, like even explosives, terrorist attacks. Eventually they got weapons on their hands, assault weapons. So this was like hit and run operations. So they were trying to figure out how to hit the bigger target, or how to stop the lizards to take something more than what they already have, like in regular situations. So how just creating problems. They were just basically creating problems, and to this the lizards of course created. It was like something between a secret police and federal police. So these people was in charge of. They were humans, by the way. This counterattack from the lizards was delivered by human soldiers, human officers, to stop these rebels. So in the time that they were fighting in the streets and all of these scenarios, they have there were two people in charge of a small commander area that was looking for the group that was controlled by Commander Lewis, in which John and Josh were involved. The guy's name was Colonel App, and below him was Mr. Cuthbert. So these two guys were the officers that were in charge of tracking and looking for these terrorists. They knew who they were, they knew who they were looking for, they had pictures and everything. But this group was very good in hiding. So, and there was a community that was helping them to hide and giving them money in order to keep on doing what they were doing. So this made it, this situation make it very complicated for the officers to crack it and find them and just giving them to the authorities. So Cuthbert once ended up in a direct fight and got wounded. Josh was the one who shot him, and they were able to escape. Cuthbert was not badly wounded, it was just a superficial wound. So he was treated, etc. So now they had like a personal fight between each other at this point. So we're talking about they were now 20 something years old, uh, and they were very well formed rebels at this point, and they were fighting in a real fight. On the street, they were shooting each other on the streets with civilians involved. So this didn't happen just once. This happened a lot of times. They got crossed by different police departments and stuff because they were moving all around. But Cuthbert and Ab were looking after them all over the country. So this, as I mentioned, this was a constant fight that was going on for a lot of years. Uh, by that point, Lisa was badly wounded and died, and Axie is still alive. John was not human, so there was no point for him marrying Axie. So, but they were really good friends. Some sort of love was between them, but nothing really applicable. Let's put it in that way. So at the end, what happened, and I'm gonna burn it this fast, is that during one battle outside the city in a very small town, they were looking for supplies, and they end up following. Cuthbert and Ab were following John and Josh. On the road, on this rural road, they crash. John he broke his leg in the crash. They go out of the van. They were driving a van. They got out of the van with the weapons in hand. They managed to reach a small house in the outside of the city. Ab and Cuthbert call for support. So eventually a helicopter arrived with more federal agents. They surrounded them and they started fighting for an hour. A lot of officers were wounded. John and Josh were wounded as well. Eventually they were captured. They were very bad wounded, and they both died in their way to the hospital. And that's the end for these two guys. The situation kept going. I mean, this was only one of the small groups, and but they lose their fight. Their fight. That's it. Bye.